So this is a conversation about teaching inquiry. Your textbook gave you a kind of a variety of different terms in regards to inquiry. It could be guided inquiry, open inquiry. So if I were to demonstrate this lesson in class, and this is what I've done in the past, so I'm going to kind of talk through this. This would be a lesson that I would use to introduce the methodology of inquiry. So what I would do first would be to essentially group students and ask them to define effective teaching. So that's our inquiry question. What is effective teaching? And obviously you're going to have groups that have different ideas about what effective teaching would be. They can bring in their prior knowledge. Oftentimes we're thinking in terms of from a student's perspective rather than from a teaching's perspective. But nonetheless, they'll collaborate together, and of course this doesn't have to be done in groups, but that's typically what I do with this particular assignment or this particular activity. And then the student groups will generate essentially what we call a hypothesis in regards to addressing the inquiry question. Now, inquiry in science is oftentimes referred to as the scientific method. It is exactly that. And when you take inquiry and you put it into a humanities-based class like social studies, government, teacher education, then you can kind of explore things a little bit differently. Your data collection is a tad bit different. Nonetheless, so you have these groups generate a hypothesis about what is effective teaching. And at that point, you give them, and this can be where it's guided to open. This obviously is a little bit of an in-between guided and open. I have something that I want them to understand about effective teaching. However, there is no clear definition on this is exactly what effective teaching is. But my work came at the front end of this lesson, which was to put together a collection of readings about effective teaching, and then I would give those to the students, and they would divide those up and start reading and collecting information and data about effective teaching. So the research says this is effective teaching, and this isn't effective teaching. In order for them to organize their thinking, in order for them to organize their data, and this is very important when you're teaching inquiry, helping students organize their data, I would give them a Venn diagram of effective strategies, ineffective strategies, and then an overlap of, what are some things that, depending on the teacher or the student, can be effective or ineffective. And the data should constitute a list for both, as well as a list for the overlap. And from there, students can start organizing the data about how to define effective teaching. But the key there is to find readings that, number one, are scholarly, two, aren't too expansive. Obviously, if you're trying to do this within a class period, 30-page readings aren't going to be a tool that you can use. If it's something that I want to carry over for multiple class periods, certainly the expansiveness of the reading can vary at that point. But that was my task as the teacher is first, what's the inquiry question? Second, what tools for data do I want students to use in order to organize and collect the data? And at that point, this is why I like to do it as a group. They process the data. They look at the data. What did your reading say? And I think then at that point you'll start fleshing out some consistent data across the reading and across the scholarship. And that data then is mined in order to determine whether or not the reevaluation of their hypothesis is correct. It's like I say, it's very similar to the scientific method. It's not overly complicated, but I think there are some really essential pieces here that the teacher needs to consider. And again, that's the upfront work. You want to give them a good inquiry question, one that may not have a definitive answer. Certainly, I'm using this in a teacher ed program in order to teach inquiry, so I wanted to give a inquiry question that would be relevant to teachers, and that is, what is an effective teacher? I don't think any of us want to finish the program and be ineffective. So, and then the scholarship, I obviously had access to some, I thought, very poignant research articles about effective teaching. Then the key there would be to help them organize their data, and as a group, have them reevaluate that data, and then based on the evaluation of the data, go back and reevaluate their hypothesis. And it may not be that their original hypothesis was incorrect. That's something that I think is, it could be. It could be that they ran across something that consistently reported that their original hypothesis was incorrect. I think more or less what we're trying to do oftentimes in these inquiry questions is to get them to elaborate more specifically and extrapolate a bit, particularly in this kind of guided to open inquiry topic that I've given. So when you do this with your grade level, and obviously elementary grades may have a little bit more definitive inquiry question, a little less open inquiry and a little more guided inquiry. Like I say, for the science curriculum, the scientific method is something that, quite frankly, I think we've taken for granted. But it is absolute inquiry. That's kind of the derivative of all other inquiry, comes from the systematic scientific method. We just kind of look at questions a little bit differently in the humanities-based classes. Math would be something that I think would be an interesting challenge. You're not asking them a math solution. That's not an inquiry question. But a lot of word problems can be turned into inquiry questions. Like I say, I think the key here for teachers is to do the front end work and then let the students work through that. So as you progress through this module, reading about the different types of inquiry, reading about the cross-curricular applications of inquiry, think in terms of, grade level, your TEKS. What are some areas within your content that may be more conducive to the inquiry method? What could be guided versus open inquiry? And then, at that point, think about how you want your students to organize their data. If we reference back to EDUC 4357, there were some strategies about thinking maps that you certainly could use to either introduce the inquiry question or help them organize their data. If you haven't taken EDUC 4357, when you get to that, that course, and of course I'll introduce a few of them, a few strategies during the module here, you'll be able to start seeing the connection between methodology and strategies, I think, a lot more clearly. But explore with this and tinker with this. Really, your development of an inquiry lesson is kind of an open inquiry assignment. So, look at what different documents are available in this module, the example with commentary about the guided inquiry lesson, and then the wrap-up, the wrap-up media that's available as well. So good luck and enjoy teaching inquiry, because it is probably one of the most engaging, highly effective methods of them all.